Mary Weatherford and I had a conversation at Spring Place in Beverly Hills in front of a live audience. Mary makes breathtaking, expansive, ethereal paintings that evoke a specific time, locale, and temperature. Her recent works, in which the canvases are affixed and sometimes juxtaposed with working neon light, provide an elusive and sometimes radical comment on the legacy of gestural abstraction. When we talked, I learned that making her paintings involves getting her feet dirty. We also discussed scoliosis, our mutual admiration for artist Alan Shields, and what it means to trust someone. She's smart and funny, and our conversation, which allowed the time and space in which to think and respond, is super authentic.
Hi, Heidi.
Hi, Mary. So I know that you were curious if I had questions, and I said that no, that I was just going to talk with you and just be present with you. So to start things off, because we're getting adjusted here. So I recently went with my daughter to get her passport renewed, and she had to get her photo taken. And the guy asked her all these different questions about really mundane things, and he said that would make the photograph better. And we were all skeptical, but then of course the photo was great because he said she was really herself when she was just thinking about these mundane things. So I want to start off by asking you what you had for breakfast today.
That's a fantastic question. I had gluten-free oatmeal, which is not necessary because oatmeal is naturally gluten-free. I had gluten-free oatmeal, a whole bunch of raspberries, a handful of walnuts. I even had some shredded coconut, and then I had heavy cream on top of that. And it was fantastic. It's my favorite meal of the day.
So, do you eat the same thing every morning?
Pretty much. I mean, I eat berries every day. I'm supposed to eat berries every day. So if I'm out of berries, no, seriously, the breakfast situation is my favorite. So if I'm out of berries, then I don't do the hot cereal. Sometimes I do make avocado toast, I have to admit. Sometimes I make myself some eggs. But I go to sleep thinking about the coffee. I mean, who doesn't? Right?
So, I don't know if you remember, but a year or so ago, I did an exhibition on ritual. And I spent about a year asking people what's the one thing they do every day that they most look forward to, and what's the one thing they do every day that they most dread.
I mean, I'm just going to say this because, I mean, this is supposed to be, we can make it interesting. I used to, I was talking to this little kid once, and I said, hey, what if you had to do everything in the order of the way that you did it? Like, you would wake up in the morning and brush your teeth for, 2 weeks. And then you would eat breakfast for 10 years. And then the day that your life would actually be one day, but everything you did would be
Extended. Yeah.
So, what do I like that I do every day? I'm not that but I love breakfast.
Yeah.
I'm not that I'm not that person that does. Well, I will tell you what I've been doing since a year. Yeah, I go for a walk in the Arroyo, where I live, and it's a 3+ mile walk, and it goes up and around. And the beauty of that is that I can see the seasons change. So right now there's a beautiful bunch of toyon berries. It's the reddest bunch of toyon berries in Los Angeles, and nobody's cut it for their Christmas decoration, and it's still there. So Sharon Lockhart took a picture of me holding this bunch of toyon berries. It's still there. It's been there for a while, and nobody's cut it down.
So do you do things that you don't like to do?
Of course, everybody does.
No.
Yes, they do.
Well, maybe it's how they think about it.
Well, somebody taught me once, like, I would do this exercise. I get up in the morning and I go write down what am I afraid of? And then I write what I was afraid of to do that day. And then I would write, if I weren't afraid, what would I do? And then I'd have this list of what I would do if I weren't afraid, which would shape my day. I'm afraid of less things lately, so I don't have to do the list. But sometimes I'm afraid of things.
So do you think you're less afraid of things because you did that?
Probably. I mean, I started that practice 15 years ago, maybe, yeah. I mean, also it's just getting older. I've gone in and out of lots of meditation and yoga, and then what I do on Thursday mornings, I brush a horse, which is fantastic, super fun, because they're really clean after I'm done, like gleaming, and they're really happy. Whatever horse it is goes back to its stable, and it thinks the whole time, pretty much, I'm going to have to ride in the ring. But then when you start to lead it back to the stall, it's looking around like, what? No work? Just a brush? Fantastic. And then they go and roll around. It's good.
Yeah, my daughter is a horse rider, so I spend a lot of time around horses. But I'm interested in this, I don't know, the intersection, I guess, of life practice and art practice. And I also, for a while, tried to do something, at least one thing every day that I was afraid of, or that made me uncomfortable, I guess. And it seemed like over time, these things became somehow less intimidating or scary or whatnot, because in my head they were always worse than actually doing them.
Well, the difficult things are all just I'm about to say my ego, but I have no idea what ego is. So it's like self, right? If I'm afraid of something, unless it's something like incredibly logical, like I used to take horseback riding lessons, but I saw a woman fall off, older than me, and she fell on the rail and broke her femur. And I looked over and her leg was like in the pants. And she was like, the scariest thing was she wasn't in pain, and she was really concerned about the apples that were in her car and the pair of the pants that she was wearing and whatnot. And the thing that was really frightening was she had zero pain, but she was really out. And so I thought, well, I can't afford to break my femur right now, so I'll just brush the horse. What was the question?
We were talking about courage,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So it's like things that I'm afraid of that are, like, say, that's, like, you can have natural, logical fears. And then everything else the stuff that I would write down would be obviously, like, fears based in self. But we're sort of circling around because it is about painting. It's about, like, the fear of painting. And I've set up my painting, and I hesitate to call it a practice, but I've set up the way I paint to be super scary, like, on purpose, because I was always afraid of stuff. So it was like a controlled situation, like it was a controlled burn, just. set up something really scary that doesn't matter in a room by yourself and deal with it.
So what's the worst thing that could happen when you're painting?
Oh, well, I told myself before I came here this morning, I practiced that I was going to pause after every question that you asked, but I'm like, I have the answer to that. Well, the funny thing is the automatic answer is I can make a mistake. So that leads me back to like, what's my problem in life? My problem is I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake. Like, so, you can psychoanalyze me on that. But so if I'm the kind of person that's afraid I'm going to make a mistake, I set up something on purpose in which I make a lot of mistakes that I correct. And that's how the paintings are now.
So,
or that I live with, mistakes that I live with. That was a mistake. How am I going to push it over? How am I going to transform it?
So there are different ways to do that, right? One is to change the way you think of it, and the other would be to actually physically change it, right? By whether you paint it over or you add something else to it, or and how do you know what to do?
Well, I like that question because a lot of times, okay, that's hyperbolic, but a few times, I leave the studio thinking, that was a disaster, that one's going in the trash. And I mean, disaster is like an overstatement, but that just like very frustrated, didn't work. And weirdly enough, then that painting becomes the portal to the next paintings. Like, because I paint on the floor, I paint flat, and so when I see it stretched on the wall, it's a completely different painting. And this one particular one I'm thinking of is called Eden, and I just thought like, God, what a bust. I like threw my stuff down, washed my feet because my feet get dirty, and went home. And then when I came the next day or two, I thought, wow, and then that became my favorite. Still one of my favorite paintings. You used it in, I think, something. You just reproduced it, Eden. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that, I had so many problems with it. So that's like it wasn't a mistake. Like, it turns out it was good. Like, that's my favorite one, where I didn't try to fix it, but it flips in my head. That's the face mistake, Heidi.
Well, it's interesting because I have been thinking about sometimes when someone shares something with me, like, I don't know, an idea or something that I might think about or work on or whatever. And oftentimes, like, it makes me feel a little uncomfortable, that I'm like, no. I kind of dismiss it or whatever. But if someone follows up, like, with that information, like in a text, or like, hey, we were talking about this, what do you think about that? Or I'm just leaving it there with you, that somehow reading it feels like less threatening to me than hearing it. And then I can actually see the wisdom of it. So there's different ways, I think, that things communicate with us, right? And of course, like when you left the painting and you were upset about it or unsatisfied or whatever.
I was resigned, Heidi.
Resigned. You were different when you came back, right? Because we're different.
Yeah, it surprised me. No, it was because I couldn't see. It was flat. And then it went on the wall, and and then it surprised me, like that switch between flat to the wall is always like very exciting. It wasn't as profound as looking at it and not liking it, and then the next day, it wasn't that profound.
Okay. So I'm intrigued by this idea that your feet get dirty. Can you talk a little bit about like the physical, what it's like for you physically in the studio?
It's kind of ridiculous, but I walk on the paintings, and I use a lot of water, and so I mean, I've seen these pictures of Helen Frankenthaler wearing slippers, but it just isn't. It doesn't work because I have to. I don't. I'm not. If you see a footprint in the paintings, it's not coy. I did never. I also like that. I was just thinking about that grammatical mistake that I almost enjoy making. Like, I did never intend to do that. I never intend to leave a footprint. I'm not coy in that way. Like, oops, accidentally on purpose left a footprint. So the goal is always no footprints, if at all possible. So it's like, like yesterday, I really hurt. I have to, I don't want to use the word train, but I have to stay in really good shape because I have to be strong to do it. But that is also the solution to one of my physical situations, which is I have scoliosis. And probably the reason that I'm strong still is that I had scoliosis and I had to start dealing with it when I was 12. So I didn't want to wear a back brace. It was really, I didn't want to have surgery. I didn't want to have my spine fused. And I lived in, we had to go to, this was the 70s really. So they didn't have, think about it, like spine surgery in the 70s. Like it's illegal now, but it's also a sort of oddly, it's kind of a feminist issue in a way because it's like girls get scoliosis. And the question, nobody knows why. Kurt Cobain had scoliosis, and nobody knows why. And it could be an energetic thing. Like a kind of shyness about the world. You start to develop breasts and you start to twist away from the world, right? So I learned how to do push-ups when I was young, and I thought if I could just stay super strong, I will never have to have this surgery and go to school in a full body cast or wear a brace. And because the girls that had to wear these braces were really shunned. You know how kids are. So I really set about, we went to Kaiser and they taught me these exercises. And I thought, I'm going to this is it. This is the key. I'm not going to wear this brace. It's not going to happen. So I would just, at every chance I'd get, I'd drop down and do like 50 push-ups. From the age of 12, I just doing this, and I'd go in bathrooms and do push-ups, and that was my thing. So at a certain point, the curve stabilized, and I got out of, this podcast is kind of winging off here. Sorry.
You're doing great.
But to bring it back to the painting, I happen to be strong because of this thing that I have that I had to be strong for. But then I enjoy making paintings that are physically taxing. So the footprints, I don't like to put them in. So the whole thing are like giant steps and like getting back out. Have to lean in on my hands. So it's very physically difficult. And sometimes I can only paint a big painting once every, and they take me a number of hours between 4 and 6. Is this getting too long? You can throw a question in there. So I get really tired afterwards and I have to rest. Like I couldn't paint every day because I'm so physically exhausted.
You know, I'm struck by the resilience aspect of the story that you just told and the determination, right? Like you saw something that because the doctor showed you and you made a choice that you didn't want that to be your experience. So I don't know if they told you to do push-ups or if that was the idea that you came up with on your own or whatever. But the fact that at every possible moment you would choose to do the push-ups, I think is an interesting brain exercise for, strangely, the career of an artist, where you actually have to put up with a lot of things that could not go your way. But depending on how you approach them and the effort that you put in, you can actually direct them to be how you want them to be. It's a career question.
It's a career question. I thought it was a painting question.
No, I think it's a career question.
Career question. Oh yeah, the career that's out of my hands. It's like linking it to I don't want to wear a back brace, so I'm going to do push-ups. It's like any effort I ever made towards getting a gallery didn't work. So I just never, I got paint. It's like I've always painted. I mean, I've sort of never gone, I mean, now I kind of go longer periods without painting, but even up until sort of recently, the longest I didn't paint was like 3 weeks. And, but I always painted from the time I left college. And it was just my, what I did. So my life was in general, work 3 days, paint 4, work 3 days, paint 4, but I'd also paint after work. So, I mean, but there were years where I didn't have a job in New York. You know, you're about to interview Richard Phillips. Like I was friends with Richard, and there were a couple years there in the 90, 91 where we all sold work, and it was really fun. And I didn't work then. Yeah.
When you worked not as a painter, what did you do?
I was a bookkeeper. I mean, also, I mean, I had this kind of series of jobs. I mean, I've taught art. However, it's too much energy out for me. I can't. I love it, and I couldn't paint and teach at the same time. But I'm a born administrator, and I love putting things in files and organizing things and alphabetizing them and making charts. So it's just, I worked in galleries. I worked even in like secondary market, which was super fun. Almost the most fun. Actually, more fun. Super crazy, like give a Warhol to a bike messenger kind of thing, and like take a $40,000 in cash to the teller at the bank. Here, put this in the, like Chagall smuggled in suitcases. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, what's not to love?
So, I mean, there's a function to that type of work, right? But did you see works of art there that then would inspire your painting practice?
Well, that's interesting. It was like standard resale. Like, what do you want? You want a Leger? You want a Chagall? You want a Warhol? I got some Nan Gold in the back. What do you got? What do you got? It was like that. So I'm not like every once in a while something like really extraordinary would come through. Like I remember once we had a Delvo. And now, like maybe if you were a good art historian, I'd say like, audience, conjure in your minds a Delvo. Fast, who can do it? Like I bet a few people, but not everybody. But I can, because we were selling it. And I just love that, like, and we were a few people down the line, right? So I learned it's like, we were trying to sell it at, I forget who knows what price it was. Say it was $1 million. But then you could, if you had brains, you could go a few art dealers down the line and get it for less than $1 million, because this person is consigning it to this person who's consigning it to this person. And then, at the end of the line, it's $1 million, but back down the stream, it's only like 900,000, And that was super fascinating to me.
When you did that work, did you work with anyone else who ended up in the art world? Like long term? So I guess where I'm coming at that from is my first job in New York, I was the slide archivist at Stuck's Gallery. And that's where I met, Doug Aiken and Keith Edmeyer. And at that time, Gavin Brown worked for Lisa as her art installer and, head preparator. And so anyway, it's just interesting to look back through the lineage, I guess, of people's time in the art world. So I was just curious about that for you.
Well, that's like, I got into the art world almost as a child, right?
Yeah, me too.
So I went, there are too many different stories, but I worked for Paula Cooper. Bob Gober's first sync show was there, and he would come in all the time and arrange his slides and make sure the labels, because I labeled the slides, so Bob would come in and sit around and arrange his slides. And but it was like that, it was very, that job. One summer I think I put all the black and white photographs in new sleeves. So that means that I saw every Carl Andre back to first Carl Andre, every Elizabeth Murray back to first Elizabeth Murray, and then of course, someone who's getting more attention now, Alan Shields. New Alan Shields work really well, Linda Benglis. So I worked at a gallery where the day-to-day work was historic, and I knew it. But I couldn't work there for very long because my boss was super hard.
It's funny that you mentioned Alan Shields, because I did an Alan Shields show at the Aspen Art Museum about 2 years ago, maybe, and that was the first show of his work in a long time, as far as I can tell. But I never really thought about his work and your work, and there are some funny affinities.
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
So that's where you go, does it sink into your work? Maybe not the resale, but definitely, I know Alan Shields' work. So the beads and the tie-dye and all that stuff, that's in my library of can-do stuff. I could do that. And he was, of course, such an incredible character. You want to tell? Just say what he did for a living, because it's so cool.
Well, he was the ferry boat driver.
Yeah, he's the ferryman.
Yeah. But in addition to that, he was a Buddhist and a meditator and cared about what he ate and loved plants. And interestingly, there are tons of things about his life and the way he lives that, are the way that I also like to live. But it's the same for you. A lot of those things are things that you do also as part of your life.
I'm not that good. I'm not as disciplined as you might think.
Well, but I'm thinking about how you have things that come off your canvases in a way that, are emblematic of some of the ways that he attached the beads and the woven elements and and it's clear from his paintings that he was a fisherman and so the nets and the beads that he would make
so
and
just
wear
just to let the radio audience know how tall he was, like 6'5" maybe.
I never met him.
Oh, okay. So I met Alan Shields. He would come in from Shelter Island, and it was like he was like blown in by the ocean. Really. I mean, it was so fun because Paula Cooper was so elegant. Just I'd hear her talking away with the perfume billowing out of her office, jammering away in French to whoever, and the way she would sell art. She's so beautiful. And the collector would come in. The collector was male back then, and she'd just lean against the wall and take a puff on her cigarette and say, "It's a great piece." And that's about it. There was like no convincing. And it was like almost the less she said, the faster the checkbook came out. And she was I was trying to tell someone, she taught me how to do things carefully because I would go into her office and she would give me a phone number in Paris, and she'd get out her Filofax and then she'd count the numbers in the phone number and she'd move her fingers across both numbers to make sure it was right. Anyway, back to the story. Alan Shields and all the different artists would come in, and that was the most fun part. So when Alan would come in, he'd be in his work clothes from the ferry boat. So he was the ferry boat captain on Shelter Island, and he'd come in all 6'4", bald, like burly, big, just like ferry boat captain outfit. And these pieces that he made were so playful, but then when you put it together, it's like classic seaman, like shipboard art, like all that scrimshaw and macrame that men make. Like it's the moment where men get to be crafty, and then that craft on land is in the female hands, but at sea it's the male hands with the very tiny craft art.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I didn't know Alan Shields' work because I wasn't around the art world then yet. And I saw a painting. Actually, Peter Eatley called me and said, Laura Hopman installed this Alan Shields painting in the MoMA galleries. It's totally your thing. You need to come and see it. And I looked at it and I was just flabbergasted. I was like, who's this artist? I have to know more about him. So
super cool. Different people. Oh God, I'm trying to. I'm having one of my favorite artists. I'm sorry. I'm a very lesser known, wonderful artist, and his name is Michael. And if somebody can fill me in on Michael Herson. Michael Herson. Michael Herson was one of lesser known. Paula was so faithful to artists, and Michael Herson never had a show, but his work was fantastic. Maybe he'd have a show in the small gallery in that new space she has, but he just look up his work. Go home, type in Michael Herson. What a great person. And he died. Did he commit suicide? He died. Whimsical art. Wonderful.
So I'm going to change topics a little bit. And know that someone asked you when you came in about your trip to Japan, and I wanted to talk to you about that too, because when we decided to do this, you were having crazy jet lag. And I also recently returned from Asia, and when we talked and you said you had jet lag, I sort of smugly thought, like, oh, I never get jet lag. And then I had the worst jet lag. So you were there for a month. Why did you go? And what did you do? And let's start to talk about that.
The jet lag was terrible. Is it because you crossed the date line? I don't know what it is.
I think it was because I said I never had it, so.
Wait, what was the first question? Why did I go? Mm-hmm. Mari Eastman is an old friend of mine. Do you know her work?
Yes.
Great artist.
I agree.
Great artist. And try not to be too long-winded about this. She has a sister named Ann Eastman, who's also an artist, but more of a conceptual artist. And the Eastmans grew up in Singapore and Japan. And the family house is in a place called Nikko, Nikko, and it's in the mountains north of Tokyo. 15 years ago, I went there with a bunch of artists. We got these tickets that were $400 round trip. It was summertime, and it was fantastic. I went with, I met Mari over there, and this house is on the grounds of one of the most important temples, some of the most important temples and shrines in all of Japan. And it's Edo period architecture. So they kind of describe it as being it's like the Versailles of Japan. So it's like crazy, super carved, like, there's a very erudite word that I'm looking for, but it's like multicolored pagodas and incredible carved temples in the mountains with some of the most beautiful waterfalls in Japan. So I knew the house, and I'm sorry this is a long answer, but Anne has created a residency in the parents' house. Everybody moved back to Berkeley, okay? The house is there. It's in Nikko. Anne's made a residency. And it's by a famous architect named Antonin Raymond, who went to Japan with Frank Lloyd Wright to build the Tokyo Grand. He loved Japan. He stayed in Japan. The answer is multifaceted. So there's the house. There's this historic house, and I love modernism. I live in a modern house now that I love. It's like a pet. You really have to take care of it, like a real modern house. And so somebody canceled, and Anne called me and said, hey, do you want to go to the house? Do you want to do a residency? So I texted my boyfriend, and I said, do you want to go to Japan for a month? He wrote back, great idea. And so we went. And I did a self-imposed residency, essentially, and I made drawings. And it's as green can be. Like, you can't imagine how green this area is. It's moss. So I made green drawings.
You don't usually work with a lot of green.
No. It's a very green set of drawings. It's lots of green, yeah. Green's hard. But if you're like, what I find is if I'm surrounded by it, it just gets in. Like, I can't paint anything else but that. I mean, the house is on the grounds of the temple. There was a temple in the back of the house. The whole thing, everything. And you can't even picture, if I say everything's covered with moss, you go, yeah, some moss. No. Everything. And it's bright green. So, and the house, it was just like all night long, we'd hear the water flowing. There's a roaring river down below and a little stream that runs to a koi pond. It's like out of a fantasy of Japan, and yet it is Japan.
And besides the drawings, what else did you do there?
Oh, let's see. I mean, we did so many things. We like drove.
Okay. So what were the
in the country.
What were the top 3 things that you did?
We had a wonderful drive one day, and it went over hill and dale through forests, and we decided we would go to a restaurant that was very old in the country, and we drove in the car, and over hill and dale, down valleys, up, and it was the weekend, and just seeing the farmland in Japan, which every time you come down into a valley, there's a small farm. Then you go up a small hill, very wooded, and go down a dirt road, turn, and then there's the restaurant, and in the restaurant are 4 people, and one of them's playing the cello. You know, it's like super magical, very, just at every turn. That was a beautiful day. And then there were pink flowers, cosmos, everywhere. And I started saying, stop, I have to get out and take a picture of the cosmos. And then I went home and painted pink flower paintings. So it's like a 1-to-1, like go on a drive, see some pink flowers, but I have to do it quick. Like quick paint the pink flowers. I can't have a space between the pink flowers and the paintings.
And is that because the image fades?
Yeah. But if I do it fast, it's right there. So we went on the drive. I said, okay, I got it. And I woke up the next morning and made all the pink flower paintings.
So when you started painting, do you know what you're going to do?
Most of the time, but it's an intention, and then the painting takes over and tells me what to do. Drawings works on paper. I can kind of keep it in my my jurisdiction. Like the drawings don't have as much to tell me, but they don't talk back as much. You know, the paintings get more out of control, but drawings, because they're smaller and it's paper and the paint soaks in super fast. I say, I'm going to make the paintings of the drive in the country where we went over hill and dale and saw the cello player and there were pink flowers everywhere.
Is the hardest part of the paint? What's the hardest part of the painting? The first part or the last part?
The first part and the last part. Like the kickoff is terrible. Like, and it really is like, my dad loves football, and so I love, like, even the term kickoff to me is like very, you know, it's like okay, so it's the kickoff. And I spend a lot of time sweeping the floor, checking the internet, listening to records, it looks like I'm wasting time, but I go to my studio and waste time for hours before I start painting. Say, like, I'll get to the studio at noon, but won't start painting until 3 or 4. But that part is necessary. So if I get to the studio at 3, I don't start painting until 6. So the empty part where I'm thinking about what's going to happen is important.
Yeah, super interesting. So I know you really like music. Do you listen to music during that prep period?
I wanted to say, Heidi, who doesn't? Who doesn't like music? What if somebody came and was like, I hate music? Like, what? That's crazy.
Is that part of your prep?
Like, I'm not one of those, like, super nerdy, like, persons with, like, a huge record collection. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know.
No, but you've used lyrics as titles, and so, I don't know.
But maybe it's just because I'm, like, a child of the 70s. Like, we had Casey Kasem, top 40. Like, does that qualify me as a lover of music? Like, well, okay, so I guess maybe it does. I mean, I love music, but then who doesn't? Do you know? But I'm like such an American music lover. But I will say, I did start taking guitar. I do have musicians in my family, like really good musicians, but rock musicians. My brother has had a punk band in San Diego for 20 years in different iterations. He's a great punk guitarist. And then his kids have a band called Teased, Teazed. Anyway, it's a great band. I'm super proud of my niece. She's an incredible singer. And so you asked me if I listen to music?
Well, I know you listen to music, but I'm just wondering about the time that it looks like you're not doing anything, but you're actually like preparing to start. And is music part of that? Intentionally?
Okay, so if the painting's hard, I can listen to music and I listen to vinyl. Sometimes there's certain times where I do listen to the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Like there's one record and the painting, I'm just flipping the record again. So, and then sometimes, like I'll just be so like, I can't believe I'm not sick of Creedence Clearwater Revival. But it's like, I think, what can I put on to paint with? And it's like, okay, here we go again with the CCR. The Who. It's like, and the weird thing about vinyl is it's stuck in time. Like, do you know what? I can never get out. It's like my Bowie album from college. I buy more vinyl, but it's not a huge collection. But then the people who work in my studio know I love vinyl, and then if you come to my birthday, I always go, just bring me records. So pretty much every birthday, every Christmas, I just get vinyl. So that's how it goes. It's an easy present.
Yeah, and it's not that common. So I think it has a significance. So. Did you paint today?
Nope. No, I did not.
Will you paint tomorrow?
Nope. No, December is just like, I got to think about the Christmas presents. The kids. I think about the kids. December is has become almost a non-painting month, but the big painting month is January. Always happens. January is like big month for me.
Are you looking forward to that?
Yeah.
So the drawings that you made in Japan, are they separate and discrete, or will they pop back up somehow in January in those paintings?
I want to say they already have. I mean, they don't. Yeah. I don't know, Heidi. I hadn't thought about it. I don't know. I mean, the big characteristic of those Japan drawings is that we were in a cedar forest. So there are verticals, big vertical trunk-like marks in them. But part of the whole thing about going to Japan was that I had to go to Japan in the first place, and this came up. Because I had to go to Japan to look for the paper. Because like everything else I use, the artist who made the paper, because in Japan it's definitely an art, passed away. And every paper maker in Japan is like, their paper is a work of art. So my paper maker passed away, so I had to find a new paper maker. And so I was on a journey to find my new paper maker. So we flew into Osaka to go to Kyoto to look for paper.
So talk about that for a second. Like the interviewing of paper makers, how did that work?
Well, I didn't interview the paper makers themselves, But there's an incredible paper store here in Los Angeles called Hiromi. And Hiromi has, it's really a world famous store. And she had, and she had been selling me paper for some time. And then I bought out all the paper in the United States by this man. I scoured the States. I found a pile of it in the Midwest, strangely enough. But I didn't interview the paper makers, but Ann Eastman introduced me to a college student, and then this kid who's very interesting artist, very odd guy, sleeps in the park, kind of, like dad's a cardiologist, but he likes to save money and sleep on a park bench. So great. I'm like, you're my guy. You're super eccentric. And so he's dealing with my new paper maker who almost doesn't have a telephone.
But you didn't meet him?
He won't, no, he's probably not going to meet me. I couldn't even pay the guy. Like we tried to send him money in cash in an envelope, and he was too busy to go to the post office to get it, so it came back to us. Like in Japan, we got this envelope back with the money for the paper. We're like, how are we going to pay this guy?
So what's a question that you get asked a lot that is annoying or you don't want to answer?
What? Wait a minute. Are you trying to make me ask the most annoying question of myself and then answer it?
I don't want you to answer it. I just want you to ask it.
How did you think up the neon?
I knew you were going to say that. and you know that I would not ask you that question. But I think it's really interesting how people ask the same things over and over again. And did I tell you that George Siegel story? I feel like I may have told you that story to get you to say yes to do this. Yeah.
I think you did.
Right? So,
yeah.
Just, without telling the story, the idea just is sometimes artists have like stock answers in a way. And they're practiced, not just artists, everyone does, right? And they're practiced sometimes because it's really important information, that you want to make sure everyone knows, but sometimes it's practiced because by saying that, then you don't have to say something else, which would maybe be more vulnerable or revealing or whatnot. So, no, I don't want you to answer the most annoying question, but I was just curious what it was.
Well, just when you're talking, I think about the vinyl albums and the needle and the groove and the answers to questions being the same. And I was thinking about how my life is my life and my story doesn't change, but I've edited the story of my life to be a certain way, but then I've only retained certain memories. And it's actually a more nuanced answer. Like, how did I think up the neon? Is like, it's such a long and complicated, well, not complicated, it's just longer, more nuanced, there's more stuff involved to getting to that than I can explain in the amount of time that I would have. So that's why it's probably annoying. Like, if I really think about it, why it's an annoying question is because the answer would take a long time to say. And then I feel obligated to try to give a short answer.
Where do you think the feeling of obligation comes from?
Well, that's a very sophisticated question, right? Like what? Why does one feel obligated to do something? And if one's like free, is there no obligation? Like, what if you just did exactly what you wanted to? Like, then you think like, oh, I'd just be drinking and smoking all day. But, it's like, probably not. Like, what do I do not out of guilt because I want to, from the heart, what is obligation? I mean, that's like take that to a philosophy class, Heidi.
But it's interesting to think about, right? So you did something that, I mean, lots of things, right, that are surprising or that people feel like they want to understand because they're curious or they love your work or whatever it is. And maybe that's like the easiest question to ask or something like that, So it's okay.
Yeah, but it was such a revelation. We have, luckily, somebody was taking a video of, I built the first neon paintings for a class in Bakersfield, and there's a video of me with my students turning on the light for the first time. And I was even surprised. I was like shocked because the woman at the neon shop in Bakersfield said, so, this was before I got it all wired up and turned it on. So, did those things, did that make the colors in the painting muddy? I said, no, I don't know. Well, I don't know. I haven't turned on the light. She goes, maybe it's going to make it look muddy. And I just thought, oh, God. So I thought, this is, turns out it's like pre-thought that it was a terrible idea. But I'd lie in bed going like, well, the great thing is, I got a stomach ache. I would get these stomach aches, like this is a terrible idea. And then I'd be relieved by the fact that it was in Bakersfield and no one would see it. I go, it's Bakersfield. No one will see it.
Yeah, so it's another example of courage, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was super gung-ho about this idea.
So, and is there a question that you hope you'll be asked?
I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. I'll have to think about that. I don't know. This has been nice. You've asked some nice, really surprising questions, like provocative.
Thank you.
Really cool.
I just have one last question, actually, that I thought of when you were thinking. I don't know exactly how I want to ask it because it's something that I'm thinking a lot about for myself. Do you think about trust?
Of course I do, Heidi.
How does it show up for you?
Well, there are two things right off the top of my head is, can I trust you and can you trust me? So who I want to be as a person is trustworthy, that I keep your confidences, I'm not going to make fun of you, I'm not going to pull the rug out from under you, I'm not going to make a snide comment, I'm not going to make a joke at your expense. Like, these are the things that are like important to me, that I want to be a person that is trustworthy. So then like, I suppose it's less important who I trust, but like getting to know someone, like, and then like reveal a little bit more about myself. Like, can I trust you with my confidences? Can I trust you not to make fun of me? Can I trust that you're not going to make a joke at my expense? Like, I'm just going to, like, hopefully, as a person, like, show up, do the best I can, and it'll be fine. Like, that's what I'm trying to do here. Like, you know.
Yeah, more than fine.
Okay.
More than fine. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Heidi.
Conversations About Art is part of Heidi.art. This episode was recorded live in front of an audience at Spring Place, Beverly Hills, as part of a program partnership between Heidi Zuckerman and Spring Place. Special thanks to Lauren Taylor and Katja Kazia. Simon Illa is our producer. Sound recording of this episode was done by Kevin Agrello. Blake Migden helped with social media. Our theme music was composed by Eric McDougall. Jordan Weisberg is our curatorial associate. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and review us on whichever platform you listened, as it helps us further our goal of connecting all to art. We will be back every other Tuesday with new episodes. Thanks for listening.